recent discovery for me as I've tried to, fast and pray and, kind of get with God on it. It wasn't something I knew. Yeah, I could maybe say it, but I hadn't experienced it. That's what Martin Luther said. How can anybody even understand the scriptures if they're not, scalded by Satan? Personally, how can you even understand the scriptures? And that really rings true now. But, to take the beating, no matter where it comes from, and Father, they know not what they do. That sounds so noble, so brave, so loving and spiritual, but it's phony unless you can go to this deeper level of saying, all right, I will take the beating, not because I'm brave, but because if that will help cull and prune and refine all of God's people, cull the fakes, prune the ones with dead branches that want to grow, and refine, like skimming off the dross, because people have to decide, by their fruit you shall know them. What's that mean? Will they have love, joy, peace? No, that's not what it means. That is not what it means, right? So we talked about that in living room there not that long ago, but the whole idea of God forcing people to recognize it must be the Lord because he's cooking fish on the beach. No, it was like there was something about him. Why did he hide? And this was a conversation Russell asked about, but I didn't have time to answer in the mere 2 hours out of 45 minutes.
Right.
He wanted 45, he got 2 hours, but I wasn't going to press it.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to answer his question. He brought it up. And why did Jesus present himself as unrecognizable? Why? He could have looked any way he wanted. Why didn't he look recognizable? And why did they not rule out immediately, well, it's not the Lord because he doesn't look the same? Why did they rule that out immediately? It might be the Lord. It must be the Lord. It's like he hid his appearance that they were used to for 3.5 years. And they knew that he didn't have to look the same to still be him. Wow, those are 2 miracles all by themselves. So why did he do that? It's because he wanted to cull, prune, and refine. And the only way he could force them to look into another realm was to say to the Father, I'm going to look transfigured now. Not that he was shiny. I mean, it wasn't like they had to shield their eyes. He's cooking fish on the shore. And they didn't say, oh, he's too shiny, we can't look at him. That was not a transfiguration, and that was real. But on the road to Emmaus with the 2 guys that, that didn't know him as well, obviously, but then his own apostles, his hand-chosen guys that were with him every day for 3.5 years. Every day. All day, every day. All night, every night. Never left his side for 3.5 years other than to go get food in the village and come back to find him with the Samaritan woman. So, I mean, they're just living with the guy, and it must be the Lord, do you think? Yeah. Then he jumps out and starts swimming to shore because he can't wait on the boat to get there. So, why did Jesus do it that way? Because he could have made himself look exactly like he had for 3.5 years. And why were they not repelled and repulsed at the idea that this guy doesn't look like Jesus, but he might be the Lord? Oh, he is the Lord. It must be the Lord. Because they were beginning to understand that this was not about molecules. This was not about cellular facial bone structure and hair length and hair color and clothing type and, body type. And that's not what life's about anymore. So the people who want to live that way, culling, like, get lost, guys. Pruning, you're the real tree, but man, you got some dead branches. You're going to have to get rid of these. And refining, it's gold, but it's dirty gold. Yeah, and the gold, silver, and precious stones, that's what God wants from us. But the wood, hay, and stubble, the pruned branches have to get burned up, and we escape as through the flames, saved, but our work is burned up. So, that's the pruning and the dead branches that turn into a bonfire. And so this whole thing is kind of fascinating to me in a way because, it's a pawn sacrifice, right? If we're all pawns, and Jesus is the only one playing chess, there are no other bishops. We already ruled that out in Matthew 23. No reverence. There's no kings and rooks living in a castle in an ivory tower in their office hours, and you can't talk to me about Jesus, Scott, because this is my vacation. It's like that's the rook. The knight's just jumping all over the place, being a superstar. Just unpredictable, jumping around. But no, we're all pawns. And the queen is going to be the bride. The king is Jesus. There's only one of those. And all we do is we protect the king. We attack their little toothless king, and we protect our king. And all the rest of us are just pawns. There's not even any rooks, bishops, or knights. The queen is yet to be promoted, but we're just pawns. So that being the case, then a pawn sacrifice is part of the game. It's structural. Yeah. They don't mean anything unless they think they mean something. The pawn doesn't mind being sacrificed because, oh no, my pawn got taken. No, if it's done strategically and the Grand Master is controlling the board, you want to control the center of the board, you want to protect the king by castling, you want to sacrifice, you've got a little gambit over here, and you've got an attack and a blitz over there, and then ultimately a promotion to queen. Jesus' bride. But it's just pawns in the meantime. Who cares if there's a pawn sacrifice? So if you know that, again, this has all just been, some painful learning and just sleepless nights, and it's good. It's driving me out of my mind in a way, but in another way, I'm learning things I couldn't have learned. And pawn sacrifice is okay. Why was Jesus a lamb led to the slaughter silent before his share? Because he was so brave. Because he wanted the culling and the pruning to take place. He needed to sacrifice himself for the blood. He needed to sacrifice himself for the spirit. It's better that I leave than I stay. I'll give you a counselor of the same kind. I'll scale myself. He wanted all of that. But there was another reason too. He wanted the people that were only halfway there to either get all the way in or all the way out. The culling. The pruning. And what does it take to cull and to prune? It takes some sort of thing that Jesus doesn't look quite the same on the fish, while he's cooking fish on the shore. He doesn't look quite the same on the road to Emmaus, but our hearts burn within us. So it's this, by their fruit you shall know them. It's not by Mother Teresa good deeds. It's by the sense of something other. Holy, holy, holy. Take your shoes off, Moses. It's always been about other. It's always been about Zoe, not heaven. That's what the Baptists love. But that has never been what it's been about. It's been life that always was and always will be. And even always is the wrong word, because always implies that there's time. And there's no time. There's no dimension that says it used to be, and now it is, and then it will be, and then it won't be. That's not what he's wanting us to experience. So how do you get there from here? It's painful, right? And how do you even know what fruit is? If you're, it's Mother Teresa feeding the poor in Calcutta. No, it's not. Plenty of people do that. Mother Teresa admitted she wasn't a Christian and didn't even believe in God in her own diary. So, so it can't be that. It just can't be. Plus, she was sure we were saved by Mary. So, anyway, messed up world, and God's just a genius, if you don't mind me saying so, because...
That's an understatement.
If you're willing to be a pawn sacrifice, because you don't have any identity beyond that. That's a qualification to being on the Grand Master's board. That's not a sacrifice that you make. Oh, well, I'm willing to not be called by a title because there's the Bible. No, you're repulsed at it because you're all just brothers. You're all just pawns. No way do you want that.
Yeah.
Get up, said the angel. Don't worship me. I don't want anything to do with that. So, anyway, it's been a fascinating journey, and I think God's taken us all to another level. It's not just some stupid book.
Yeah.
It's like he's just, he's tightening the screws on everybody, and it's okay. You got to be okay with it. Because if you're some sort of martyr that's willing to be sacrificed because whatever, well, that's a little pompous.
Yeah.
But if you know that it's just part of God's plan, okay.
Yeah.
If that helps Cull the pretenders that just, run for the hills, cockle-doodle-doo, whatever, that was pruning. That was cockle-doodle-doo. That was Peter. He was pruned. Judas was called.
Mm-hmm.
He was cut off. He hung himself. Things that look almost the same are radically different. So how do you tell the difference? Well, it takes something special to call and to prune and to refine. It takes something special. It's not a commitment. It's the master, the grand master chess player, which is Jesus, moving his pawns around. Because he's always got to work with their pawns, so that's cool. It's all that to say. It's been an interesting journey, and I can't think of the day I didn't learn something new. But this is still radical for me, and to come to grips with how to love your enemies, other than a command.
Right.
I get the command. I hear you. And it's hard, but I'll work it out. Because I like to obey commands, so I'll work it out.
Right.
But that's not the level he loved people on. That was not it. It was a command, but the level he loved them on was God so loved the world. Why? Because they were victims. And until you've called and pruned and refined, you don't really know who would have turned the corner and who's a pretender that looks good and who's just a person that likes to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
It takes scandal out to make that determination, and even then we can't make that determination. But this day you'll be with me in paradise. This day you'll be with me in the garden. That's apparently the same word, so still one of the things I'm spending a lot of time with lately. This has all been quite an adventure.